Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. I am Jim Browdy. As I told you at 11 o'clock, Marjorie doesn't work anymore when it's more than 90 degrees, so I guess we'll see her next week. Shirley Leung was kind enough from the Boston Globe to join us. Shirley, it's good to see you again.
Hi.
Today, we have an addition to Ask the Mayor. We're not only joined by the Mayor of the City of Boston, Marty Walsh, but Yusufi Vali, who is the city's new director of the Office for Immigrant Advancement. A pleasure to meet you, by the way. Thanks so much for being here.
Wonderful to be here.
They're both here to take our questions and yours. You can tweet them at BOS Public Radio, send an email to bpr@wgbh.org, or call them at 877-301-8097. Yusufi and Mayor Walsh, good to have you both.
It's great to be here.
Thank you.
So, Mayor Walsh, I think the city of Boston's heat emergency just went into effect a few minutes ago.
It did at 12 o'clock until, I think, Monday.
Have you done heat emergencies before?
We have, but not the stress of the emergency has not risen to the level it is today. Generally, what we do with a heat emergency is if we're going to get 3 90-degree weathers constitutes the heat wave. In the past, we've had like one day at 90, and then unexpectedly getting 2 more days, so we institute the heat wave there. This one is a little different in the sense of it's the same as far as BCYF centers will be open, Boston Center for Youth and Family Centers will be open. They'll be called cooling centers, free of charge for people to go in there. We'll have water, some of them are pools, and we'll have opportunities for people to get in there. We're getting a lot more information out to people. If you have questions on the heat, 311 or go to the cityofboston.gov website, how to prepare. Any emergencies you see over the next 3 days, call 911. We're looking at, the weather's going to be in the 90s, obviously, for the next 3 days, but they're looking at the heat as high as 112, could feel 112 degrees tomorrow. And that's what they're saying, 110, 112, and the same on Sunday. So we are concerned about the heat. We're concerned about our seniors. We're concerned about people that are being shut in. We're concerned about homeless folks in the street. We're concerned about general people on the street in that type of excessive heat. If you don't stay hydrated, you don't drink a lot of water, there could be problems. And we want you to be very careful. People listening here today in front of us here at the library, make sure you drink plenty of water, plenty of liquids, and take care of yourself. We're not used to that type of heat.
Do you have more on the heat, or you know?
No, I don't.
Can we move to my favorite
yes.
subject and one of yours too? You wrote a letter to Stephanie Pollock, the Secretary of Transportation, who does not even respond to our emails anymore, I should say, inviting her on, but she responded to you, I guess, saying the T is not currently a functional service. For those who haven't read about your letter, what was your concern and what are you looking for, Mr. Mayor?
The letter is, the MBTA has been very clear that it's going to take several months for it to get up to full service on the red line in certain areas, and that expect delays. And I know people don't accept that, but at least they know that in the next 2 months, hopefully by September, the T will be up running at a better capacity than it is today. I've asked the MBTA to increase service on the red line. Add more cars, even though it's going to be a slower service, add more cars for capacity, and also add more cars to the Fairmont line to be able to get people in. My concern today, and all along, there's many different concerns, but I met with some business leaders the other day, and some of them were saying that people have abandoned and decided not to take the train anymore. And
Myself included.
And if we get people, well, to use you as an example, that's another car on the road.
Yes.
And if we have more cars on the road and people aren't taking public transit, it's going to cause another issue.
Yes.
We know what the answer is. The answer is, spending the $8 billion, making the investment, $8 billion investment into projects, tangible projects that people see the project, not talking about the future spending, actually what the project's going to be. Lay out a plan on where that $8 billion is going to be spent, how that money's going to be spent, how people are going to see a change in service, with the ultimate goal of having a system that is a 21st century system that we can be proud of. In the short term, and there is a short-term piece here, having situations where we're not having derailments and other delays. Delays might happen regardless because of just functionality, but it just, in the last several months, it's been just such a bigger issue, and we can't be having that, and making sure that the maintenance and all of the tracks are up to speed, making sure the trains and the trolleys and the buses are up to speed. The response to that letter was twofold. I got a call yesterday from the general manager of the MBTA, Steve Poftak, and we suggested that we have a meeting next week, and our offices, it could be set by now, but our office are working on setting a meeting up. And the second was Stephanie Pollock contacted me as well to let me know that they're certainly interested and very concerned about the T, but also wanting to try and see how do we move forward.
Do you get a sense? I mean, I have to say, I can't think of anything that has upset a broader swath of our listeners than the T mess, the 100,000 ride shares. I know it's not a transportation thing, but as part of the nightmare at the registry of motor vehicles. When you read the story yesterday, I mean, you're a chief executive. When you read the story yesterday, the guy who was responsible for the subdivision of the registry, who was the one that apparently allowed notifications which might have led to suspension of licenses, including the guy who apparently killed 7 motorcyclists in New Hampshire, was in England and stayed there even after this bin with these unopened envelopes was discovered, to watch the Yankees play the Red Sox and stuff. Would you have allowed such a person in your administration to stay on vacation in the middle of a crisis like this?
No, you can't. I mean, let's put aside the gentleman, the guy who killed the motorcyclist. Put that aside a minute. When you have an administrative offices, sometimes they're as important as carrying out the work, meaning as far as being on the street. Once that incident happens, and it's hard to criticize elected officials for that. That's a systematic piece where you have to come back and you have to find out what happened there, and you have to admit the fault and then fix the problem. And this, the first case of the suspended license that we found out after the fact happened a few weeks ago. And then this gentleman not being around, I mean, you got to come back in and you got to fix the problems. First of all, I don't even understand why you don't take the suspended licenses and you don't do the proper due diligence of entering them into the computer and just doing your job. And that's something that it's a management structure, and you have to make sure you have the checks and balances in place. It starts at the top. It starts with the leader of the registry, and then all of the management positions under there need to do their job. And particularly, we're not talking about, Parks and Recreation not pruning a tree. You're talking about a situation where, in this case, it was life and death, and there was a problem, clearly. And there's other cases that we don't know of yet that potentially could be life and death.
So what's your reaction to both Secretary Pollock, neither Secretary Pollock nor the governor, who was her boss, either ordering this guy back, or the fact that he didn't voluntarily come back, not firing the guy?
Well, you don't know.
Where's the accountability?
I don't know what the behind-the-scenes stuff is. I can't speak to that because I don't know what the governor said. I don't know what the secretary said. I've not talked to him about that situation. I mean, clearly that's not an area that has my jurisdiction at all. I mean, the MBTA certainly is a little different. It connects.
But
to
you
the
would have
city.
managed that situation differently, is what you told us.
Well, I think and I think that the governor certainly is upset about it.
Do you know that, or you're assuming?
Yeah, I know that. We talked a little bit about we didn't get into the details, but I talked to the governor the other day, and he's not happy, clearly, and that's something that I think that we all depend and rely upon the people that work with us to do their job. I had a cabinet meeting this morning. It's a completely separate issue, and one thing I said in the cabinet today, my cabinet was, and we're talking generally about work, that if somebody is looking to get something done, it shouldn't take the mayor of Boston to call somebody in a different department, whether it's Parks and Recreation, Transportation, Immigrant Advancement. It should be assumed that we're there to help people and that the job has to happen. And it's happened not to that seriousness of what's going on with the RMV, but you have to make sure you hold people accountable. And today, I kind of, when I say I put people on notice, I put the cabinet on notice, and I do it almost every single week we meet, that our job is to respond to the public. And sometimes the answer to the public isn't a popular one for people, but we still have to respond. And it frustrates me if I hear that, let me give you a better example. People might not know what I'm talking about. So the other day we had a meeting in Mattapan, and we talked about some of residents were going to talk to me about the crime that was going on in Mattapan. What the meeting turned into was a branding of Mattapan, people feeling that Mattapan has a reputation that they're upset about, that these are hardworking people. Mattapan should have a positive reputation, and they wanted to do something positive about Mattapan. How do you promote Mattapan? And I asked my coordinator to put a meeting together with some of the folks in the administration in different areas to talk about what the next steps would be. The response was, by some people in the administration, was, well, that's not really our role. We have a different role. And then I had to get involved and call people in. I said, wait a second. Your role is to do what we want to do here. And your role, and we fixed it up, but if we had let it go, Now we're talking 6 months down the road, and the people in Mattapan are like, what happened? You were going to meet with them. So it is about accountability.
I have one last question on the T thing, and I know Shirley has one or two, and then we want to speak to your colleague. When you spoke to the governor the other day, did you express a concern about the lack of a sense of urgency, or what did you say about the T?
We talked. I mean, we've talked about the T for a while. When we went down to, when we were in D.C. With the infrastructure meeting, the thing we did, we talked about the T and the importance of the T. And I think that, this is a series of events that have happened that have, certainly risen the level of anger and frustration to a point that I've never seen before here in Massachusetts and in Boston. And when you think about Boston as a city, we're growing, and I've expressed to the MBTA and the governor as well, the economy is based on having a public transportation system. These companies that are moving into our city from other places need to move their employees around and get them around. And if we don't have, up until the last 6 months, I mean, I knew the T had to have infrastructure improvements, but I didn't think it was going to be a detriment to moving companies in here.
Is it now?
Not yet, but I'm concerned it's starting to. And I'm concerned about people saying, wait a second, we don't want to go to Boston. You have, and that's why we filed a series of legislation to try and create funding opportunities in the city with regional government, with regional cities and towns, on a regional ballot initiative that would allow us to put a ballot initiative forth to raise revenue to put in infrastructure projects.
Like they did in L.A.
Like
or LA County.
Exactly why we did that. Because Eric Garcetti talked to me about it and said, we're building a subway, brand new subway. And so we thought maybe we can do it here in Boston and in the surrounding cities and towns. Myself, Joe Curtatone and Somerville get together, some other mayors, maybe Mayor Koch and Quincy, and we say, okay, we want to do a regional thing on the MBTA, that on the red line. So those are things that we have to start thinking outside the box. And I'll say this, we need revenue. $8 billion is a great way to make investments. We need revenue because it's not simply MBTA. And I think that the conversation around revenue has to happen.
Do you think the governor is closer to understanding that?
I know that's something you have to ask him. I know for me as a former legislator and as the mayor of Boston, you can't fix an infrastructure. I mean, I'm getting criticized today, and somebody might call in, for not moving quick enough on bike infrastructure, okay, in Boston. And we're building bike infrastructure, and I think we have 9 miles in this year's budget. We're going to do 9 miles over the course of the next bunch of years. And it's not fast enough for the advocates to get moving forward. I appreciate that, and I understand that, and I don't disagree with them. But you're thinking about where do we get the funding, and how do we build an old system in the city of Boston? Now, the problem I have, and the concern I have, is that if the T's not working at a 90% level, and I start digging up every street in Boston, the transportation concerns that people are going to have are going to go, they're going to be they're going to be irate about it. So we have to be very careful and cognizant. And then we have work going on the Tobin Bridge. We have work going on the Mass Pike. We have work in different places that has to be done. And we have work on, in Boston, I think we're going to be working on 8 to 10 bridges over the course of the next 24 months. We have a bridge in Hyde Park that shut down that has been being reconstructed. We have the North Washington Street Bridge down here, and the connection between the North End and Charlestown that basically is going to be down to 1 lane. We have those major infrastructures. We're working on the Northern Ave Bridge. So there's a lot going on, and we have to be able to think about how do we plan this stuff out.
Do you have a cot in your office at City Hall? Because I think you're going to need one.
Maybe.
We're talking to Mayor Walsh.
So Mayor Walsh, but you said the system needs more revenue, and so beyond regional ballot initiatives, what other ways do you think the state should raise revenue?
I mean, I think we have to, I haven't been in those conversations with the leadership in a long time. When I was a rep, I certainly was. And I think that I know that people, when I was in the legislature, the speaker and the Senate, we raised the gas tax and we indexed it. I thought it was a great way of getting revenue in because it was a dedicated revenue source. It went right to transportation. In 2014, that ballot initiative got overturned. Which we lost revenue there.
The inflation adjustment.
The inflation adjustment, and that was a dedicated revenue source. And what that allows you to do is that funding allows you to go borrow money and pay down the debt on that money you borrow. And that's something that's really important. Now, I know the voters voted it down. I think it was 60-40, maybe they voted down. I think it's not time now to go out and talk to people. I think if you ask voters today, and I could be completely wrong, but I think if you ask people today that, would you be willing to accept a gas tax, maybe a 10-year period, would you be willing to impose that on yourself for infrastructure improvements? I'd be willing to bet that poll today would come back 60-40 the other way, if not higher.
Were you wrong when you seemed to be okay around July 1st or 2nd with the fare increase? You're not so good about
No,
it
I mean,
anymore.
the issue with the fare increase is, I mean, the fare increase is something that the T needs to keep to stay afloat. My concern with the fare increase is that we raised the fare and the services got decreased. And what I asked right before the fare increase is just to delay it till September or October, because you're talking about paying more with delays. And I'm not saying, I didn't say stop the fare increase, because you need revenue, and that's one aspect of revenue.
Can we speak to your colleague for a minute?
Absolutely.
I'm sure we're going to return to transit. Tell us first of all, who are you? I know who you are, but a lot of the listeners may not. And what's your mission? What did the mayor pick you to do?
Well, first of all, I want to just begin by thanking the mayor for giving me this just awesome responsibility and opportunity to lead this office. As you all know, we have 29% of our city is actually foreign-born and immigrant. And for me, the reason I took the job and grateful to do it is because I myself am an immigrant. I came to this country when I was 9 from the middle of India to the middle of Kansas City. And like most immigrants,
Just like the same place.
yeah, exactly. And like most immigrants, and the first 3-4 years were a real struggle. You know, my father was 44, my mother was 40. We didn't, because we had to figure out economically how to support ourselves. My mother worked for the first time in her life. My father would go door to door, passing out yellow page directories. I'd join him in that work, and it was tough on our family of 5. But then my father got a job with the Missouri Department of Natural Resources. And that's when it was as if the American dream, at least for me, began. Because we moved out to a suburb of Kansas City, got into a decent school system. And what's powerful is that I've been able to do things and live my life in a way that I know I couldn't have lived in India, particularly as a Muslim. And you know what the politics back there are like. And so for me, the mission of Immigrant Advancement is, how do we help immigrants in this city realize the American dream, how everyone has a shot to do that.
Can we, 2 quick things about this, and then we're going to get to your calls, we promise, at 877-301-8970. And by the way, that voice you just heard is Yusufi Vali, who is running this immigrant. What's the formal name of the office?
Mayor's Office of Immigrant Advancement.
You know, we all thought these raids were coming on Sunday, and I naively thought that after Trump wasn't able to do an executive order to add the census question, that he was going to double down on Sunday. They're going to be horrible. In fact, it didn't happen, at least at the degree we happened. But we read stories in Shirley's paper, and I'm sure you encounter them every day. Is the fear of the anticipation cause people not to send their kid to school, take their spouse to the doctor for an important appointment? How do you address the emotional fear that people have, even when things don't happen as people were concerned they would? You know what I mean, of course.
I think it's a great point. I think what's, first of all, really important for people to understand about the raids is that our office was on a call with 88 different cities about whether there were real raids that happened. And what we learned across the board was it was basically business as usual for ICE. That doesn't mean that ICE didn't show up at people's door, but it was business as usual, right? So you're 100% right that what the president is trying to do here is sow fear in the hearts and minds of the people of our country and divide us. But what I like to point to is, you know, what happened just now with Congressman Presley, and point to the local piece. We had the mayor who came out and supported her right off the bat. We had the whole delegation come out, and congressional and senatorial delegation come out and support her right off the bat. And we had a Republican governor do the same thing. And I think that speaks to the ethos of Boston and Massachusetts. We protect our own. And what the mayor, when I took this job, was very clear, is that he wants to make sure every resident, doesn't matter whether you're white, black, documented, not undocumented, that in Boston, you're going to be safe, protected, and we're going to work diligently to do that. And
but what does that person do who has the fear regardless? Do they call you? Do they call your office? Do they hope they can find what do they do to allay? What do you advise them to do?
Well, I think the first really important thing is to know your rights, right? And so, look, if an ICE officer comes to your door, what people need to realize, and I think the general public needs to help us disseminate this information to folks that are in that situation, is you can refuse to open the door to your home. All right, you have the option to stay silent. This is what most lawyers recommend. Remember to stay calm, don't run, and it can be a very pressure-filled kind of situation, and so make sure you don't make anything up. Just do not lie if you do choose to speak. Again, lawyers recommend you don't do that. Also, if they offer you any forms to sign, don't sign them. Again, your choice. And make sure to speak to your lawyer or your consulate. And I think that knowing your rights is the first line of defense. And then the second piece is, in Boston, we're a very strong community, and I think it's important that you don't just try to handle this thing by yourself, that you have a plan if someone does show up from ICE, that you just make sure that you can call a neighbor or a friend. And the beautiful thing about Boston is that we, as opposed to turning on one another, we turn to one another. And that's to your point about, we know the president's going to keep on doing this, but I think time after time we've showed as Bostonians that we're going to stick together, right? Tree of Life synagogue shooting, we stuck together. New Zealand attacks, we stuck together. And the mayor has shown phenomenal leadership in being out in the communities and making sure everyone appreciates that.
I think there's a couple of things too. Just, you know, when we have our forums, come to them. Family members, we're doing citizenship classes as well. A lot of people have green cards and they're afraid or they don't want to become citizens, meaning they're worried about the process. We're going to put one on, I think, in September, where we had about 500 people last time that went through and helped fill out the paperwork, and then knowing your rights. And the reason why...
Aren't you raising money for lawyers?
Yeah, we raise private money. We put some money from the city in there as well. This is in the defense fund. We work with the consul generals. But let me just take this a little step further, because lately it's all about negativity and worry about ICE. The Office of Immigrant Advancement, when I became the mayor, it was the Immigrant Committee, Immigrant Commission, and we changed it because advancing immigrants, many immigrants in our city, our business owners, our parents obviously, are involved in our community, and it isn't just about how do we fight back and worry about ICE, it's also about how do we advance immigrants that come to this country. Many people, Yusufi said this, 29% of the people that live in our city are born in another country, like my mother as well. And a lot of our small businesses, many of our small businesses are run by immigrants and created by immigrants. So it's rather than have this negative stereotype that the White House is trying to portray about immigrants. We're doing pretty well as a city. We're pretty successful. $9 billion worth of development, 50,000 new people living in our city in the last 5 years, 120,000 new jobs. The economy's going great. AAA. I can talk about all the good things. And we're a city that is multicultural. Yeah, we're a city that's multiracial. We're a city that the women, the households, majority of the households in our city are led by women. So we're a diverse city, and it is about some positive things that we have to continue to push on. We were going to let people know their rights, absolutely. And what happened last weekend, I thought it was, first of all, we've never seen anything like this where the President of the United States, any President of the United States of America, has announced that we were going to raid people in cities. 2 weeks after we had a military parade with tanks going through Washington. I mean, this is just not right.
Want to take some calls, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, let's go to, is it Mendez in Hyde Park?
Hey, Mendez, you're on Boston Public Radio with the mayor and Yusufi Vali. Hi.
Hey, how you doing? So yeah, my name. So full disclosure, I actually I've been released out of prison 3 years ago. I did 5 years in prison. So when I'm happy to say I just finished probation as yesterday. My probation called me and told me
Good for you.
I've done everything.